Welcome to the Regular Joe's podcast. I'm Dave Pisani.
I'm Barry Kay.
I'm Todd Pleasant.
I'm Brian Mix.
And I'm Micheal McMaster.
We have a special guest, everybody.
Special guest, yeah.
Well, Brian's a guest, but not really because he's family. And we have special guest Micheal McMaster, who you'll hear about if you don't know about. But if you're nerds like us, you probably know who he is. But first,
this past weekend was a significant birthday for Todd. So we want to wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yes, happy birthday.
As you know, because we already told you this, Dave and I met Todd Stashwick this weekend at a con, and we got him to sign a picture for you.
Wait, and Micheal, do you know him?
Yeah,
because I saw him on your Facebook.
Oh, cool! I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So we didn't show you the picture that he signed for you, Todd. Yeah, we were just saying how it's a small world, right? Everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
But so Todd, he signed this photo for you. And what he wrote was, Todd, you're missing a D, but whatever. ... You're one D and he's two Ds.
That's awesome.
And he wrote, live long and prosper at the bottom. So we will get this to you next time we see you in person.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
He was a really good dude. He is a fan, and he's doing this, acting.
He was like, too. He was telling us, he's like, I bleed this stuff, and he starts showing us all of his tattoos, and he's got Star Trek tattoos, Star Wars tattoos, Dungeons and Dragons tattoos.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool. Very, very nice guy. Really cool.
I read an interview with him, and he was just thrilled to be doing it, and like I said, he was a great character. So it really added to the show.
So. Awesome. So we thought you'd appreciate that. There wasn't much else at that con that you would have appreciated, but we knew that was one thing.
That's for sure.
That's awesome.
So, Micheal, first question is, when someone says, "Oh, what do you do?" At least in this context, what do you say?
Well, I am a droid builder for Lucasfilm and Disney. I build, maintain, and operate droids.
There you go.
For a living.
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
That's really awesome. But I just found something on YouTube, a story that ABC did. You're a citrus farmer also. Is that correct?
So back up a little bit. So I live on a 90-acre citrus farm that my grandparents started in 1919. So what is that, 104 years? Our family has been farming citrus. I started out doing R2-D2s for fun. It was just a hobby, and it was a hobby that turned into what it is today. I kind of Forrest Gumped into it. I fell into it.
Right. And
it's so cool though, is we know some people now, including yourself now, that have started doing things like this or in and around, the things that they love as hobbies, and it's, managed to turn itself into a career. And then it's amazing when you can do that. Not everybody gets to do that. So
no, we don't. Some of us has real stupid jobs.
Yeah, that's, you talk to, you've spoken with Tom Spina and Gordon Tarpley and people like that. We all started in our garages just doing it for fun.
Yeah.
And then it blossomed, you could say.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just still fascinated by this. Do you live still on the farm, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you, whatever.
How much of your time is spent farming versus droiding?
I still do full-time farming. So I really have 2 full-time jobs.
Okay.
That's
so
awesome.
Getting on the tractor for that ABC thing, that wasn't just that was actually part of the job. That's great.
That was real. I was dressed really nice. I would normally be dressed
I was kind of thinking
like
that.
a homeless person on the tractor, but they said, "Oh no, go out and they said, what farming thing can you do?" And I said, "Well, I have work I have to do on this piece over here." And they said, "Great." They hopped in the pickup and they followed me out there, and the cameraman, I'd zip by him and he'd give me a little thumbs up.
That's great. That's great.
Coyotes are watching what is this? What's happening?
Yeah.
I'm sure we could ask you a lot of questions about citrus farming, but we'll probably stick to the droid stuff.
I do find it fascinating.
It's a real job, not like, I'm in advertising. It's not a real job. That's fun.
I'm in education. That's not real either. That's cool. So how soon before the 2 passions or the 2 work things come together? How soon before we can expect robots to be doing most of your work?
Yeah.
You know how often I get asked that?
I am not surprised at all. It used to be softball.
I bet your wife's waiting for a robot that'll clean her house. Well, now once they find out about the citrus farming, when are you going to get a weeding robot or a tree topping robot or an irrigating robot?
No.
I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Well, but don't you control most of the robots by hand? So aren't you actually still doing the work yourself, even if you're doing it with a remote control?
That is true. Yeah, everything I do is puppeteered, so I'd still be doing the work.
Yeah,
it would all be a lie.
Yep.
Dave and I were at a small local convention this past weekend, and there was an R2. I don't think the R2 group was there, but there was a single R2 there, and the guy was driving it with an Xbox controller. Is that kind of common at this point? I was surprised it wasn't a bigger controller.
That's a point of contention with me. I come from a background 30 years ago. I was flying 2-meter electric gliders.
Okay.
And so I've always used professional commercial radio.
Yeah.
And I would never do a professional job without such a tool.
Yeah.
And so I frown on the little Xbox controllers and whatnot. But you know what? For a hobbyist, I'm sure it's fine. But I wouldn't even go to a convention with one because I just
love that there's little in not fighting, but little like you're a poser because you use an Xbox controller.
Well,
but I even
people
called it out.
Apparently are trying to use these controllers in submarines now, so you saw how that went.
Yeah,
I know that's too soon, but
I remember saying to Dave, I'm like, I'm a little surprised this guy's driving this R2 around just with an Xbox controller. I thought you needed something more than that.
That scares the crap out of me at conventions because there's guys with remote controls like this big. This is the whole joystick function. Is
I've seen this with the Nintendo, with the
and it's like that's 100-pound hunk of metal flying around at 15, 20 miles an hour, and you go, and it's going to fall over. It's going to hit somebody. I hate that.
Yeah. So we were at a Star Wars event, and it was held in a museum, a Star Wars collection museum. And one of the operators had that type of remote, and it was like the Wild West. He had no control over it.
Oh,
and he was running into celebrity guests.
Wow.
He was running into displays, and I just stood back, and I said, there you go. That's what I'm talking about. But
that's well, there you go. Good point. That makes a good point. Let's back up. So you're a citrus farmer, your family's a citrus farmer, have you always been like a maker, a tinkerer, and then you found R2, or how did that all start?
So my dad built his own house. He built his own farm equipment, so I grew up around that. As soon as I was old enough to learn how to weld, I was building farm equipment for him. And when I was a little kid in the 70s, I made a cardboard B9 robot, and I was making R2-D2s out of plywood on the old roller skates that would attach to your shoe with a key.
Sure.
That dates me a little. Most people
we're all on the same dates.
There.
But anyway, I would do things like that. And then, in 2001, I just got the wild hair. I had bought an R2-D2, a wired remote controlled R2-D2 for my kids for Christmas. And I started taking it apart as soon as they got it. And I said, I could do the exact same thing, only full size, because I've always wanted R2-D2. I go online searching for plans or information. I stumble upon the R2-D2 Builders Club, and which at the time was only a few years old. I was about the 550th member. I don't know. Now there's 20 or 30,000 members.
Oh, are there really?
Wow.
But anyway, I started that way. I just started building once I found the club, and picked up a few skills along the way because I was very deficient on my woodworking skills and some of my electronics. And, even the technology that existed 20 years ago, so primitive by today's standards.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
The R2-D2s that I build now are nothing like the early ones.
Oh, really? That's cool. How many
Brian, you got into this about that long ago as well, right? How long have you been building?
Well, that's I always like to say I started my R2-D2 the day after The Empire Strikes Back came out, but it took me 25 years to finish them because I had to wait for the R2 Builders Club to show up to get the dome, which is the key part, is the aluminum dome. And back then, and that's where I met Mike, was at the R2 Builders Club when it was 3 droids, the 2 mics and mine, that was it.
Oh, really? Wow.
And we were using windshield wiper motors and. The guys who could find the wheelchair motors were really.
That's what I heard.
That's
wheelchair
a great
motors.
Motor, and now it's like they have dedicated motors and gearboxes and servos that do everything. It's too easy to build an R2 now.
Oh, good. It's on my list to
They
do.
practically build themselves. That's right.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure the two of you can say that. I'm not sure the rest of us can say
Yeah,
that.
that's definitely. I feel like that's a retirement project for me. But so, how many R2s have you built?
Well, I built 13 R2D2s. I'm working on my 40th and 41st droid projects.
Oh, wow.
And not counting Wally, Robbie. And
wow, that's
I'm working on my second Wally now, so about 43 robots.
Do you have a robot total, including
that
droids?
Was the
yeah, it's around 43.
Okay,
43.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
And do you have all those R2s?
Oh, that's what I was going to say. How many of those were jobs for other people or other companies versus for personal use?
The only thing I can say about that is that the first droid I built was R2D2, and then I have one here in the shop. The last one I built, most recent one I built a year ago, is my R2D2. So two of them, and then the rest live elsewhere.
Okay, fair enough.
They're out there.
Yeah, we can just imagine. That's pretty cool. So you obviously love Star Wars too, right? Ty, did you have a question?
I was just going to say, before we go back onto that, the Wally is amazing. I got to say, I love Wally, and to take something that exists and create it like R2 is one thing, but to take an animated object and make it so realistically, such a realistic representation of it, is just absolutely amazing. And
thank you. Yeah, that blows me away. Character.
I do too.
It speaks English. It's got those big puppy dog eyes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what is there not to love? Yeah. It's got a kind heart, and everywhere we go, I have a folder full of photos of people crying. I've never seen people cry like they do around Wally. Men and women, young and old, doesn't matter. And usually it's because they love the characters so much, but it's animated, and they never think they'll meet it. When we shot in New York, even people from Pixar had never seen one in person, and they lost their minds. It's ridiculous. It's
a brilliant design as an animated character, because it is so anthropomorphic that you were just drawn into, like, it's, there's human tendencies, there's animal there's things, these characteristics, but you just capture it, and it just, like I said, I think like you nailed it. It's got a human voice, and when it's in front of you and it starts talking, it really comes to life in a way that even R2D2, the bleeps and the bloops, and it feels like R2, but it's not the same as Wally talking and speaking. But like little details, like the head shields, the moving, and I don't know what they're actually called, but
eyebrows.
The eyebrows. But I'm saying that's what drives it home. It's not just a manifestation of this. It becomes this becomes Wally. And
over a decade ago, I became friends with Jay Schuster, who's the man who created Wally for Pixar. And he's an animator and a modeler. And he was just here visiting the house a few weeks ago, and he had never driven it. So I gave him the remote, and even he just sat there and was just stunned by it. And he said, and I designed the thing. But he was very thoughtful in the way he approached it. It was very mechanical. He studied dump trucks and trash compactors and all these things. So it had a very real world feel to it, even though it did things that were quite possibly impossible. The idea that it could, turn into a cube and stuff is crazy. But you don't care. You can, put that aside.
Let's pause here a second. And Micheal, tell them about the tracks on Wally, because I know that was an adventure. Yeah.
So the very first thing I started out with was the track drive on Wally, because if I couldn't drive it, I didn't want it. I don't want static statues. I want things that move and are animated, So I started working on this thing, and we had problems with it derailing and burning up motors, and we didn't realize how much a track drive, how many amps it pulls. And my friend Mike Senna, who was working with me on the project, he brought an amp meter that plugged in line with everything, and it went up to 100 amps. And we thought, well, surely, R2 only pulls 6 amps. So we hooked this thing up. We start moving it. The first time we turn, his amp meter makes a popping sound and blue smoke comes out.
Oh my God.
And it's like we had exceeded 100 amps. And now we understand. When we were at Jet Propulsion Lab once talking about all of this.
Yeah, why not?
And they said that's the reason why all their rovers have wheels and not tracks, because of the high energy consumption.
Oh, wow.
It takes a lot of energy to push tracks. So we learned a lot along the way, the hard way. That's the only way I learn, I guess, by burning things and blowing things up.
You don't have a formal background in engineering or... Yeah, I mean, you've just figured all this out over the years as you go.
YouTube videos. I devour YouTube videos.
The place I was going with that, Mike, was that Wall-E tracks, every segment is a special design. So he cast every single segment of those tracks. It's not like he went out and found a track off a
I
tank
did
or something.
see that on
each individual
video.
track.
Yeah, that every single thing on Wall-E, and we'll put pictures up somewhere on Instagram, is made. It's not like there's no found objects.
Yeah, it was the first entirely handmade thing that I built. And that's really what led into me building Chopper for Lucasfilm, was that they wanted something built that had never been made before. And so it had to be scratch built. And Wall-E kind of looked good on my resume, you could say.
Yeah, one animated droid to another animated
droid.
That's
I think you're probably the foremost creator of physical animated droids. So, and that you did too.
Yeah.
So it's like,
before we jump, and I know we want to, I'm sure, talk about Chopper, but and I think you mentioned it quickly. So you built Wall-E, and then they wanted to do a TV series. Was a Disney thing, obviously, or a Pixar thing?
Are you which?
This is Wall-E in New York.
Wall-E in New York. Yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, so that comes much later. Yeah, this is just in 2019. I guess it was late 2018 when we started talking about it. And they said, yeah, we want to do basically what they call Pixar in real life. We're going to have all these scenarios with animated characters come to life in New York City. And they just wanted to bring him in. And it was funny. So we fly him to New York. We're driving around 6th Avenue just to get some B-roll. And New Yorkers are completely indifferent. They could care less. In fact, most were irritated because it's early in the morning. People are trying to get to work. They're walking around. I'm like, I get this thing out of my way. We're trying to cross 6th Avenue, and we have like 10 people literally just out of camera frame surrounding him because he's very slow. Well, the light, of course, turns red, and then it turns green, and cabs are honking and flipping off Wall-E. And there's footage of that, but we're never going to show it.
So gotta be great footage. As I'm watching the video, I'm thinking that's got to be somebody they put up. Like the people just walk by him and don't even turn and look. That actually,
I would say 1 out of 100 even glanced at.
Hilarious. I was watching this thinking that has to be somebody that they've set up to do this.
You haven't spent enough time in New York.
Yeah, you haven't. My wife, unfortunately, who's fine, got hit by a cab in New York, and people just walk by her as she's on the ground in the middle of the street. On 6th Avenue, no less. We're probably not far from where Wall-E was. But New Yorkers, I tell you.
They're unflappable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to talk about Chopper just because I'm obviously a huge Star Wars fan, but I was a huge Rebels fan. And I was so excited to see him for a brief moment in Rogue One. Was that your Chopper in Rogue One?
Yeah. So I in 2013, I got called in. Dave Filoni wanted me to build Chopper. And his exact words were, I would like to have my own Chopper before the R2 builders find out and make 100 of them, which has kind of come to pass. They've eventually, they're everywhere. They're almost as prolific as R2-D2s now. But so anyway, I agreed to do it. And we had 3 months to build it. I built it in 87 days. And then we took it out on tour to promote Rebels. This was before Rebels had come out. And we traveled. We went to the Nuremberg Toy Fair in Germany. And we went to Star Wars weekends in Orlando. And people would yell, "Hey, R2," because they didn't know what it was. But then once the series came out, after season 1, everybody knew Chopper. And everybody was excited to see it. And it was a lot of fun. But along the way, I get the call. They said, we're going to crate it up and send it to London. It's going to go to Pinewood Studios. It's going to be in Rogue One. And I couldn't go. I had other build projects, and there was no way I could go. So Matt Martin from Lucasfilm flew along with it with Mary Franklin. I know Pablo Hidalgo was there, some others. And they had one of the UK prop guys was driving it But the scene that it actually appears in, it was Matt Martin driving because they broke for lunch and the UK crew disappeared. But the Americans that were there, they said, no, we got to get this finished. And they were rehearsing. And so Matt said, I'll take Chopper. And so Matt did the rehearsal while the UK folks were having lunch. And so then when it came time to shoot it, he was ready to go. And they said, yeah, just go ahead. So
see, that wouldn't happen
awesome.
in the U.S. because of unions, but
right.
still,
Yeah.
that's
So
awesome.
that was built for Dave or for Lucasfilm, or
it was built for Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
They had the funding had to come. They had to find a way to fund it, and it wound up being the Star Wars show. They decided to make it a mascot for the Star Wars show. He'd make
okay.
an appearance in every episode. And then eventually we built a Mouse Droid and an R3A3 and some other things that appeared. Tom Spina made a Gonk droid that made appearances. And so that was where they got the funding. And so Dave could have his droid and use it, but then it would also be a permanent fixture for StarWars.com.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome. And now, have you built your own chopper too?
Okay. I'll see if I can do this.
As we're seeing his
That's
workshop, everybody, which
if I can get my camera to turn around, which it's not doing. Oh, wait. There we go. Can you see his little dome?
Oh,
yeah.
Right there. So I've never finished him.
Oh.
And the reason why.
What's under the black curtain? No, I'm kidding.
Who knows? So I had finally started in, what was that, 2020. I had started building Chopper. I thought I'll 3D print it. And then we're going to mold it, make fiberglass mold, and, Then I get a call from a friend who is modeling. He sells 3D models, and he calls about this. He said, I'm making
He pointed to a probe droid, everybody.
Imperial probe droid. Would you be interested in being a beta tester? Because nobody else wants to try to print it full size. And of course, I immediately drop everything because that's my favorite droid in Star Wars. Don't tell R2. And a year and a half later, there it is.
I do remember you printing it on, seeing it on Instagram and stuff. So how many parts is that?
Oh gosh, I have no idea. Lots of parts.
Yeah.
It was almost, I want to say it was about 1,800 hours of 3D printing.
Oh my God. And
is that like a large
machines.
Format printer?
Large,
or are you, how big are
CR10s.
you able to?
I was going to say CR10. And the CR10 is relatively
Not
new.
that big, but
How big's the bed?
It's 500 cubed.
Okay.
Yeah.
But everything's got to be in pieces. I mean, it's not, yeah.
Oh yeah. So the body is 4 feet in diameter.
Oh my
and
God,
there
is it
are
that
10,
big?
10 pie-shaped segments that glue together.
And that's as close to in scale with the one from Empire, right? I mean,
It is 1-to-1 scale.
Yeah, 1-to-1 scale.
So-
Okay.
So to the Norway, there was a Norway shooting version, which actually shot the scene with between Han and Chewbacca. Everything else was the miniature that Phil Tippett animated.
Yeah.
Most of what you see in the film is the animated one.
Yeah. So he built this model and wanted you to build it, and you built it. And so we're all a little all over the place. And then Lucasfilm wanted it for Mandalorian.
Okay, so I was about 2/3 of the way done, and I get a call. I can talk about this now from the team that was shooting Kenobi, and there were going to be 2 different scenes that had the probe droid in it. They wanted just the head originally, and it was going to be in the droid workshop, the one that they went through the back door and they hid.
Yep.
And I kept telling them how big it was, and apparently they don't understand what 4 feet in diameter is. I get there, and they said, that's way too big. It'll take up most of our set space. So they rejected it on the spot. But they said, but we're going to shoot a probe droid scene out in the desert. And I was interested, but again, it was 115 degrees out in the desert. It was going to take 3 days, and it was going to have to stay in a storage container, a metal, non-air conditioned container that was probably 140 degrees. And I said, nope, can't do that. So that was the end of it. And I was disappointed, but I thought, okay, well, then we go a few months further along, and I'm getting the legs put together. And I've done work for season 3. I built 9 droids for season 3 of The Mandalorian. And they said, hey, we understand that the probe droid didn't get used. I said, that's right. And he said, we'd be interested in using it in the scene. We have a scene where a droid delivers a message. And that's all they told me. And they said, we'd like to use it. Do the legs work? And I said, well, they will. And they said, well, we need it. They gave me the time frame, and I panicked. And I worked myself silly, and I got the legs, antennas, everything working. And they said, well, how are we going to mount it? Because we want it to fly into the scene.
Yeah.
And I said, I've already built a mounting plate in the back. That's I made this sort of cantilevered rail that could hold it from behind.
Oh, wow.
And I said, give me the mounting plate that goes on your camera boom, and I'll modify it to fit on this. So I did. And then I took it down there. We bolted it to a camera boom, and we shot the scene.
So when it flies down,
That's awesome.
I have to admit, I assumed that was CG. That was actual practically, you actually put it in on a camera boom.
It was all practically done. I think
wow.
the only thing that was CG, when it first flies in, they removed my legs because they wanted the legs to move a little bit more dynamically. Yeah. And so the scene where it flies in, the legs are CG, everything else is real. And then once it's the wide shot where it's actually there delivering the message and scanning her and all that, it's all this.
Wow. That's awesome.
That's
was that
awesome.
Before or after I ran into you at the convention and you were running it around on top of the snow berm?
So when we had it at Star Wars Celebration, we had just shot a month earlier.
Oh, wow.
And so everybody kept saying things like, oh, you should talk to Lucasfilm and get that in a show. And I'm like, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I had to sit on that for a year and a half. So,
oh my God, that's awesome.
I'm at the convention and I see the head of this thing coming through the crowd, and I'm like, "Where's Mike? Where's Mike?" Mike's like 15 feet behind it, and he says, "You never see a crowd part for any other droid like you do for this one."
So,
I've never experienced that before, where literally, with a droid, they're only about 3 feet tall or shorter, and you always need handlers out front going, "Pardon me, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me." This crazy thing, we'd fire it up and it's doing all the dialogue, all the sound effects. And the crowd literally just part like the Red Sea. I just drive forward and they get out of the way. It was amazing. And we drove all day, every day. It was great.
So what do you mount it on to drive it around?
So it is mounted on a base that looks kind of like snow.
Oh,
and there are motors down there. The base is basically R2-D2. It's the same drive system, and a lot of caster wheels around the perimeter. There's like 8 caster wheels and 2 great big drive wheels, and the NPC motors, and
How heavy is that actual droid that it's not top heavy when it's even mounted on that base?
The droid weighs 98 pounds, 3D printed. I figure with all the electronics and hardware and whatnot, it's probably about 130 pounds. The whole thing, top to bottom, weighs about 168 pounds, which is no more than my R2-D2, believe it or not.
Do you have a camera up in the body so you can see over the crowd?
No, I just stand behind it. I stand behind it and let the crowd get out of the way.
Yeah, okay. No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And how does it I know these are stupid questions, but how does it travel? Was it in like a giant crate or?
Oh, it's terrible because it all has to come apart. The head comes off and goes on a little platform, a wheeled platform, a dolly, and then the body sits on another dolly, and then the legs go in a bag, and then the base breaks down. It all unbolts, but we carried it in a U-Haul truck.
Uh-huh.
So I want to go back to something you said before. If you can talk about it, you said you did 9 droids.
I was gonna go. I was sort of where I was going.
Mandalorian season 3. Can you talk about? I mean, I think the Mouse Droids were yours, right?
Yeah. So we built an R5D4, which is their second droid. They have the hero version, and then ours, which could go 232, go from 2-leg to 3-leg and back.
Oh wow!
And be drivable, and it could do it just however they wanted. You could even drive it in 2-leg mode, but it was frowned upon because it's very top heavy.
Uh-huh.
We built a bunch of Mouse Droids. There was Grief Karga's R4, the orange one. That's his droid. I did the black when they were on the planet that had the droid bar. We had the black Imperial droid, which is probably the prettiest droid we've ever made. It was like brand new, shiny, glossy.
Yeah.
gorgeous, which was painted by their paint department, by the way, not us. They recycled our RX droids from Book of Boba Fett. Those are in the bar. When the humans walk in, they're the ones that pop up and turn and look, which is kind of cute.
Okay, so they were the really card dealers in the right. They were the card dealers in Boba Fett, right?
And the card dealers, and they were the TSA agents.
Right.
Yes,
right.
I remember the TSA agents.
They were just
Now, was that an original design of theirs, and you built it, or?
Yeah. So they just gave us illustrations and dimensions. They had actually gone to the trouble of measuring the RX droid from the parks, and they said, well, this is the height and the width, and but it looks similar, but it's totally different.
Oh, it is. It's actually amazing to me that droid has been reused so many times. I've always loved that design since I was a little kid and I first went to Star Tours. But it's just amazing to me that droid keeps popping up.
Yeah, and it just, I know, it just keeps, and I assume we'll see it in the future.
Yeah,
it makes perfect sense, though.
If you were eagle-eyed and you looked at the Ahsoka trailer, you'll see one in there.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It makes perfect sense. I mean, it's a truck. It's a utility thing. And
it's a utility droid, yeah.
And they totally. They're just going to keep using that design until it's obsolete, and
just like Mouse Droids.
And then other
I love the Mouse Droid.
Oh, the Mouse Droid.
I love the Mouse. I
love what you did with them for the Mandalorian season 3. Gave them a little more character.
Yeah.
So what they did is, this is what's really funny about all of that. They said we need 5 Mouse Droids, okay, and when we built them, we were going to give them numbers. And then we said, no, they're Mouse Droids. We got to give them names. So we gave them cheese names. So there was Feta, there was Brie, there was Jack, there was Gouda. And here's what's funny about that is that there were very specific operators that were given a Mouse Droid. And so then they wouldn't drive the other ones. Well, I drive Gouda. I won't drive Feta. And they all became so attached that there's supposed to be that wide shot from above where one of them drives off the edge, and you hear the little. It's like you can in your head you can hear a Wilhelm scream, as it goes over.
Yep.
They call me and they say, you know what, we're going to have to wreck one of them, but we're too attached to these. Can you make one more?
Oh my God!
And I said, in like 2 weeks we could make one, and they said, no, we need it Monday. So I panic. I look over here at my workbench. There's my personal Mouse Droid, and I'm like, sorry, fella.
Oh.
So we sent him off, and that was the one we named Jack because he was the stunt droid.
Yeah.
And he's the one that goes over the edge.
Oh.
Did he suffer any damage going over the edge?
He fell into a foam pit. He was fine.
Good. Okay.
Good.
So what about Will's droid? Because Will was very proud of his burned up Mouse Droid. Was that from the same shoot, right?
That was from, that was Kenobi, I think.
Was that Kenobi?
Right?
Okay.
I think so. Or no, it was Kenobi, or maybe it was an earlier season of Mandalorian.
There were Mouse Droids before.
In season 1, one of the Mouse Droids gets shot when they're in that.
Oh, yeah, gets shot.
That was one of mine.
That must be it. Okay.
Yeah, that was episode 6. No, yeah, that was the one I built for Lucasfilm, the one that they had the fans name it. They name it Cheese. CH33Z.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, we had it on set for the day. And the guy's calling Mousy. Well, it was, I can't think of that actor's name.
Clancy.
I know it. Clancy Brown.
Yeah, thank you. Clancy Brown. And he's calling it, and it runs away, and he shoots it. But when you see the flash, the explosion, then it goes to a CG Mouse Droid.
Oh,
so
really? That's so funny.
There are parts everywhere. Yeah, they didn't actually, because Lucasfilm said you're not wrecking our droid.
Yeah.
But another R2 builder a friend of ours, Will, who's the nicest guy you'll ever meet. If you ever seen the pictures of the little girl inside the R2 unit at one of the celebrations, the only, George Lucas took a picture of her inside the R2 unit. He had it as a stroller, R2 stroller. Anyway, he built a Mouse Droid, and they wanted to do a pyro on it. And he's like, yes, please do it. Well, it might burn it. Okay, go. Please. So at R2LA, he was very proudly, had his R2 on. It says, as seen on TV, blowing up Mouse Droid with the burn marks on the top. He said, I'm never cleaning it up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like the hangar scene in Kenobi or something that happened. But yeah.
So that
And then
Scar.
you added the lights. We never saw the little flashing lights
yeah,
on
those
the
were cool.
Yeah, the
mouse
lights
droid.
were all added in post.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going to start. I'll start with the mouse droid. I've always loved it. That seems.
That's a
I'm
great
hoping it's
start.
easier than an R2 unit.
And what's funny about the lights is that not even a week after the episode, by that weekend, like 3 or 4 days later, a mouse droid builder had already added the lights.
Of course they
working.
did.
Yeah, of course.
That's awesome. So like the probe droid is yours, obviously. You own that probe droid, but then
Yes.
some of the droids you build for Lucasfilm, and they sort of mix and match that way, or?
Yeah, I mean, they will call me and say we need a very specific droid, whether it's for Jedi Temple Challenge or we did one for Science and Star Wars or for the Star Wars show or for the TV shows. And those are commissioned and they own them.
Mm-hmm.
Disney will hire us to build things for the parks that appear on stage or wherever. And those just leave and they own them outright.
Okay.
Once in a great while, I'll have something that was one of a kind at the time. I think now there's 3 or 4 being built, so it won't be long before they're everywhere.
Yeah.
But at the time, we had the only one, and Jon Favreau really wanted a physical representation. He didn't want a CG.
That's what's great
about
about
CG
those
one
guys.
in Kenobi, which looked really good, but
they've been doing that since the first season of Mando, right? Like when they brought in the 501st because they needed troopers and they didn't have costumes. And that's one of the things I love about those productions, just as an outside observer, that they're willing to bring people in like that.
Yeah, and when we got this mounted to the camera boom, the director was there and Jon Favreau and a couple other production folks, and John just lost his mind. And he was asking me questions about, the history, which I knew a lot of. And so I started talking directly to him about the history, and I realized everybody in the studio had stopped to listen to stories about the original probe droid. And I thought, how bizarre this is. This is surreal, because he and I are about the same age and like the same things. And he's just a big kid, and he's been given the reins to this series. And you can tell that it is not lost on him.
Yeah, yeah.
So how about you, though? Like, how do you feel in a situation like that where you grew up as a huge fan of these things and now you're there with that crew standing around listening to you talk about it to the director? And
it's ridiculous. If you told 11-year-old me when I saw the original that I would have any involvement with anything like this, I would have thought you're crazy. And I still don't believe it, really. I pinch myself every day. I mean, it's not a job.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It is and it isn't,
Yeah.
But that's what's so great about it.
But
yeah, for sure.
That goes away.
The fact that you can still feel that excitement about it, even though you're, grinding away doing it, and, having crazy deadlines from what it sounds like. And, but the fact that you can still appreciate it and as much as it sounds like you do is awesome.
That is, especially as like you say, 11-year-old kid. I mean, I saw Star Wars when I was 11, and then I started making Super 8 movies. But if someone said, "Hey, by the way, you're going to build robots for Star Wars one day," it's the fact that it's still going after 40 plus years is amazing too.
Right? Yeah, that's unbelievable.
That's awesome.
None of us saw that.
You mentioned, do you have a crew that you work with, or you said we a couple times, like, or is it just sort of people help you out?
My son Kyle works full time in the shop with me, but other than that, it's just the two of us in the workshop. But these are a huge, huge team effort. People that spin the aluminum domes, make the aluminum parts. There's a guy named Matthew Henricks who's made my wood frames and legs. Another guy that makes the foot shells. There are all these different disciplines. No one person can do it. It's impossible, So
in most cases, you're not fabricating the entire thing from scratch. You're leveraging parts that are out there or people that know how to make specific components that you're taking all of that and putting it together to make the droid.
Right. The only thing, the probe droid was all made here, 3D printed, but yet again, Dave Moog in the UK was the guy who had made the 3D model. Without that, none of this would happen.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. So yeah, and I guess the R2, I mean, I haven't built anything like that, but they started out as like hand cut wooden frames, and now they're CNC and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I made my frame. My first R2 was a wooden frame I made by hand and styrene plastic skins and fiberglass parts and resin parts and cobbled together. It wasn't 100% accurate, but it was mine, and I was excited about it.
I know you said you 3D printed it. Is that sort of the main medium of building these days, or?
We have seen the R2 builders shift dramatically in the last 5 years. I was one who was actually a little against 3D printing at the beginning.
That's what I was leading
cheating.
to. That,
it's cheating.
I know cheating. People who say that. You don't even see. It's funny because Brian, when we started talking about making, I started out as like a woodworker, so my first thing goes to wood. Like and Brian was like, wood. He's like fiberglass. So you're more old school than me, but I have embraced the 3D printing and laser cutting and all that stuff. So,
and now
it's not cheating.
I'm doing mixed things. I'll see if I can show you this. So with Robbie, this was all the original that I did was 3D printed, just like the probe droid. Then we made giant molds, and these are fiberglass parts. The head, the body, the hips, the legs, because I knew that the 3D printed parts would not hold up with that much weight. And so, I'm still it's a mixed bag, you know?
Well, that's what most like, I mean, like FB effects and all those, they tend to 3D print and then mold. I mean, whether it's helmets or whatever.
Right. It's 3D printing is just a tool. It's just another hammer. And
Brian.
I utilize it where it fits. Other times we make things from scratch, or we go to a machinist and make it out of aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
The R5, that was all aluminum. That was a 250-pound droid.
Really? Wow.
But that it was dictated because we had to have all these mechanisms to make it go from 2-leg to 3-leg.
Yeah.
You needed hollow legs. You needed a hollow body to fit all the hardware. And that was the only way to do it. And, looking back, it would have been great if it was fiberglass or carbon fiber, but there was no time. We had 10 weeks, and I can't develop a droid in that time from scratch, that's that complex. So we used tools that we had, parts that we knew we could get overnight, and make it work.
Yeah. I have to ask you a question. When you just panned the camera, there was LX back there. Is that the one from Jedi Temple Challenge?
Yeah. So we have My R2. We have LXR5. We've got Wally in the corner there. See if you can see who's behind
Nobody
LX.
puts Wally in the corner. Sorry.
Yeah,
that's
unfortunately I do. Apparently,
okay.
That's
I
see
can
Maximilian. Is that not Maximilian? The other guy,
Vincent back there.
Vincent.
Yeah.
There you go. Vincent.
Oh, nice catch. Yeah.
We got
put my
Chopper.
finger on it.
R4 P17, which is another favorite of mine. I've been working on that for 20 years.
I don't even know that droid.
That dome 20 years ago.
Wow.
And other droids have gotten in the way. So,
okay, I wrote a list of just questions that we always. I have a 2-part question. What's your favorite robot? Just across the board, favorite robot.
It's so difficult because if it's something I built, I'd say Wally.
Well, my next question is, what's the favorite robot that you've built? So
okay, then I'll do this backwards. So Wally's my favorite that I've built.
Okay,
with R2D2 being a very close second. My all-time favorite robot growing up. First thing I saw as a kid was Forbidden Planet, and it's Robbie.
Yeah.
And I'm just now getting around to building a Robbie.
Yeah.
It took me, I'm 57, so it's taken me 50 years to get around to building a Robbie properly.
So Brian for 20 years. Well, obviously you've seen his.
I've seen his. I remember his little workshop that was adjacent to his house there, this little tiny room.
It was a hallway.
I built this gorgeous Robbie, and I drooled over it, and I fantasized about it, and And even then, it's taken another 15 years for me to do this.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It is the
So,
quintessential
I gotta ask
sci-fi
you-
robot. It's just like Robbie is.
It was the beginning of everything. I mean,
it is, and that's just it. And it's yeah.
Robbie and
Design is
B9
brilliant.
are my favorites. I
Robert
think.
Kaneshita, genius.
Right, it's just
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah.
His two kind of hallmark designs just kind of encapsulate two different,
And so different.
60s.
Yeah,
But the 50s
so,
and the
yeah.
60s, it just captures it right there. And
when they were auctioning off Robbie in New York a few years back, Dave and I both separately went down to the auction house because they were having a viewing and you could actually see it. So it was wild just to be in the presence of that thing. And I was with my wife and I'm like, is anybody looking? She's like, why? I'm like, because I need to touch it and I don't want anybody to see me. And I leaned over and I just touched him because I'm like, holy crap, this is the Rob. That was like the real one. Yeah. But it was pretty nuts to see.
Yeah, that was
standing
cool.
next to it.
And they even had the original like plywood cases from
the shipping crates and the
50s
control
and
boxes.
stuff.
Everything was there. Yeah.
And then it sold for almost $5 million. So
as well,
like literally the most expensive movie prop in history.
Yeah, exactly.
And should have been. And should have been.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
So Mike, are you building yours as a suit?
Okay, so the first one, the fiberglass version is too heavy. It can't be a suit. It's just too heavy. I mean, you wouldn't last 10 minutes. So we have molds. We're looking at different materials that we can spray inside the molds. Maybe make like a foam rubber suit of some sort. I don't know. We're still debating. There's a lot of neat materials out there that exist now that are very lightweight but rigid.
Yeah,
you know, and like kind of like some of these epoxies. We use freeform air to sculpt a lot of things. I'm using it to sculpt parts on Wally right now, and it weighs nothing. Super strong. And so there's some materials that are sprayable that, as long as we're not going to damage the molds, I would very much like to make a walking suit.
Yeah, and that Robbie is something that you're building for yourself, or is that a commission of some sort?
Yep, that is my childhood dream right there.
There you go.
That's great.
I'm not working right now. There's a writer's strike, so I'm taking full advantage.
Oh, I thought you were going to say there was something wrong with the citrus crop. You meant writer's strike. Yeah.
So the thing that impresses me about this whole journey is back at Celebration 1. Was it when you were you at Celebration 1 when they got access to the ILM R2?
I didn't arrive until Celebration 3 in 2005.
Okay.
That was my first show.
I missed the first two.
You missed the first. Okay, so one of the handlers of R2D2 when the R2 Builders Club was a tiny room with half a droid in it, rolled in with the ILM R2 and drove it around and let the guys see it. And he said, okay, I'm going to go to bed, but I don't want to pack this thing up. Can I just leave it with you guys? It'll be safe, right? And he went to bed. And of course, out came the measuring tools and the calipers. And the cameras and everything. And the droid build, the droid R2 Builders Club was born. And all the blueprints came out and all the designs came out and the droids got built and some were close, some were not close. They finally standardized, and now those droids are canon because all the R2 Club stuff is those blueprints are canon because that's all the stuff they use in the shows now.
Yeah.
It's come full circle.
Yeah, the two of the builders that I kind of grew up in the club with, Oliver Steeples and Lee Towersy, they got hired to work on Episode 7.
They were the first ones. Yeah.
They created the droid, the R2 crew. And they were fans. They were club members. And
I remember seeing an interview that they were like, "We're building them, and they don't really work. And then there's fans building them better. So why not hire the fans?"
Yeah. And so Oliver, the movie business was not for him. It was boring and long hours, and so he didn't stick with it. But Lee now has done every film since Episode 7, and the TV shows. He's worked on Andor. He's working on season 2 of Andor right now. And he and I talk because, we're kind of contemporaries, we grew up in the club and we're doing these crazy things and it's unreal.
Fanboys gone pro.
probably good that you've got a few people like that you can sort of, commiserate with and talk to, because you have similar
cry on their shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? The neat thing is that all these people, all these droid builders that have been involved, because a lot of the droid builders on the West Coast have been able to get on the shows, and everybody across the board is so nice. It's just a neat group. We don't have quite the problems that you see with other costuming groups that are more maybe organized. We have no
totally see that. I totally see
there's
that.
no structure to the R2 Builders Club. It's just build to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
It's a great philosophy, and it served us well.
And there was some stuff at the R2 Builders meet last couple months ago that was stunning. I mean, the stuff these guys are building, it's like, oh, really?
Yeah,
really?
You're embarrassed that you haven't thought of it yourself, right? You see it like, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
And then these guys go all out now. It's no holds barred. I mean, anything that shows up in the movies is going to show up on the droids. They said the rockets on the side of R2 could never fit. Well, guess what? There's guys who've designed rockets that can fit inside the legs. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Crazy. So now the R2 Builders Club encompasses other Star Wars robots, or is it? So
the R2 builders had always been, all droids.
Yeah.
But over the years, it's branched out. There were C-3PO builders, I think some of the first ones that branched out because it was more costume.
Yeah.
Then you had the Mouse Droids. And now there's subgroups for everything. The RX droids, R4s, R5s, you name it, there is a group for it.
Yeah.
And so you could still go to astromech.net, which is the home of all things droid and kind of the home of R2. But if you like a very specific droid like B2 from Andor, there's a B2 builders group. And there's any flavor, any droid you're interested in, I guarantee there's a group.
No, that's great.
Somewhere. Probably 2 or 3.
I'm sure, right? That's awesome. Another question, another list question. On this show, we rank our favorite movies. What did we do? A 2-part episode of the top 100 movies. Was it 3 parts? Anyway.
The 100 movies was 2.
The 100 movies.
Yeah.
Anyway, I will never ask someone what's your favorite movie, because you can't have one favorite movie. What are your top 5 favorite movies? And these can change tomorrow, so no pressure. Because
Close Encounters. Close Encounters is one of my all-time favorites. Without a doubt, I think the very top of my list is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Wow,
it still holds up. And Back to the Future. I think that's just because of the time. I was right out of high school, and that movie just blew me away. Probably the second Alien film, Aliens.
Sure.
How many is that?
That's 4.
Well, you didn't list Star Wars. Are you saying other than Star Wars, or?
Oh no, yeah, and Star Wars.
And Terminator 2, and those are all my favorite movies.
Okay, good.
And Forbidden Planet. What about Forbidden
Original
Planet?
Star Wars, known as Star Wars. Okay, good.
Yeah. Forbidden Planet will be a runner-up.
Yeah.
So.
That's
It's,
awesome.
By the way, I have to.
That is an impossible question.
That's why there were, so another friend of ours, Daryl, who's often on the show, he's not on today, but all 5 of us did the top 100, our top 100, and it was, first of all, the fighting just to figure out how to decide, how to calculate, rank everything.
Yeah, it was.
And we finally got to it. I don't honestly remember what it was, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, probably Empire Strikes Back, Aliens. Those are in the top 5. I don't remember the exact. There was a whole weighting system and ranking system, but obviously.
Yeah, because then, gosh, you'd have Raiders and E.T. and suddenly I'm like,
it's so hard.
That's a rabbit hole, man.
Yeah, it's a total rabbit hole. Total rabbit hole.
So while we're sitting here talking, Spina just texted me, and I told him we were recording with you, and he told me to tell you we said hello. So hello,
hi, Tom.
Spina.
That's so funny.
He is a sweetheart of a guy, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think
he and I have
gets
become
enough
good
credit.
friends over the last couple of years, and I don't think there's a day goes by he's not texting me something, and it's usually not about Star Wars. It's usually about music or something. So
he and I bonded over Muppets. I am obsessed with Muppets, and that's kind of how he got his start.
Yeah.
So
That's cool.
Yeah, I went with him once to the Museum of the Moving Image in New York, where they've got the whole Jim Henson exhibit. And going through there with him and listening to all the stories he has about literally everything that's in that place was like so much better than just walking through it. You know, I had like a private tour guide. It was crazy.
I mean, people know him for Star Wars, but really the Muppet thing is a true passion.
Yeah. Well, so, and like we were saying about you, just another guy who started out doing this as a hobby and has turned it into multiple careers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right.
You just never know.
Yeah.
You talked about Rod. We sort of do this thing, what's on your workbench, but we're just going to ask you what's on your workbench because ours aren't interesting. So other than Robbie,
and I know you said
you got to go to, what's your Instagram? Because you mentioned the neon tubes. You had neon tubes made with the voice and everything, right?
Yeah. So my Instagram is McMaster_robots on Instagram. It's really the only social media I have other than Facebook, but Facebook is more for friends and family, and then the Instagram is kind of for everything else. But yeah, so the Robbie, I wanted to be as accurate as possible, and Brian knows we've talked a lot about all the different parts and mechanisms. You want it to be as accurate as possible, but you want it to operate reliably. So there are some upgrades and newer motors and newer technology you can use. And there's a lot of different ways to make some of these things happen. The one thing I would not budge on, in our Robbie Builders group, there are people that use LEDs.
Oh my God, that's the travesty.
No.
I know. And I God bless them. They can do whatever they want, but I'm going with neon. And even when I post it on Instagram, people are immediately like, well, why are you doing it this way? It'd be easier to do LEDs. Well, I'm not looking to do it easy. I'm looking to do it accurately. And nothing replicates neon.
Yeah. So I saw someone built that neon is it a guy who's in the club or is he the neon guy or?
Oh, okay. So, I have a friend, Dan Lanigan, who
we know Dan.
A neon
he's
guy.
He's got an okay collection of stuff.
Yes, a little collection of his own.
You want to talk about a robot collection? He has one of the original Johnny Fives. I mean, he's serious. He's serious. But anyway, he has a friend. He did a series on props.
Oh yeah,
on Disney Plus,
Disney thing. Yeah,
on Disney Plus, which has now unfortunately been taken down, which is a travesty because it was a wonderful show. But one of the episodes, they were talking about Tron, and he had a neon guy who had restored the Flynn's arcade.
Oh, yes, I remember that, yeah.
And so I asked him, I said, Dan, you had this guy that you interviewed. Do you know him? Oh, yeah, we're really good friends. I said, do you think he'd be interested in this? And he said, well, let's find out. And I contact the guy, and the guy's like, oh my gosh, I would love this. I love Robbie, and he likes a challenge, because it's not just tubes blinking on and off together. As Brian will point out, that the tops and bottoms are brighter, the center is a little darker, and it honestly looks like a mouth. But they all kind of, and they kind of move in this weird, random fashion, but it's a little bit more thought behind it. And I had a chance to speak with Bill Malone, who had Robbie for about 28 years before he sold it at auction.
That's the guy we met at the auction house. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said that the tubes had different resistance values on them. And he gave me the amounts. He had some of the notes that he was able to share with me. So we're replicating that, but instead of using the resistors, we're using controllers that we can program. So if we plug this in and it doesn't look quite right, we can literally take the controller out and reprogram it.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Each individual tube is on its own circuit, and we can control each tube individually. So it's kind of a modern take. Still the neon, it's still argon gas to give you that nice, beautiful blue, but it's handled with modern electronics and transformers. They used transformers in Robbie that were enormous, and they got hot, and they were a little dangerous. I mean, the neon requires 5,000 volts, and the wires are all just kind of sticking out of the back of the tubes.
Oh,
and
Your
I remember
face.
they talked about the actor that was inside of it. Every once in a while, he'd touch those 5,000-volt lines with a hand or elbow or whatever, and I'm sure he got quite a tingle.
Should
But
put some electrical tape over them or something. Jeez.
so that's what I said. And apparently, that's something you don't do with neon. There's some reason. He explained. He spent 5 minutes explaining the other day when he was in my shop
Oh, that's
why
funny.
you don't wrap tape on those wires. Something
that's
about
interesting.
heat or conductivity, and I just kind of tuned it out and said, okay, tape bad, and
Okay.
and there, we'll what we're going to do is make a shield behind it,
Yeah.
like a grill or a grate out of it has to be non-conductive material. So we're
Silicone.
figuring out. We'll put something back there, and
Yeah.
so
That's why when it was at the auction house, that Bill was there, and I know the auctioneers didn't like it, but he was always messing around with it. It's like, dude, you practically don't own it anymore because it's going up for auction tomorrow. But he came in and he turned it on.
He turned it on,
He
yeah.
was talking and doing stuff, and the auction guy's like, that's not good. But anyway, it was cool to see. I was thrilled to be able to see that.
amazing. I would have given anything to see that.
Yeah.
I'm very envious. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was awesome. You know who also is amazing? As Barry
Hey,
reminded me, Fanboy Collectibles. They're our sponsor. Check it out. Okay. Did you see the Pure Arts Batman cowl from The Flash? That
That's
looks
pretty sweet.
amazing.
Yeah, full size Batman cowl.
Oh,
Batman
really?
cowl. Exo 6 Data just announced. That's up for pre-order. Todd, I'm sure you have it or getting it or getting another one. Hot Toys Iron Man Silver Centurion is in stock.
Diecast.
That's a reissue, I think.
It's diecast this time, yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. Sideshow and Pops and Hot Toys and everything you need. Check those guys out, fanboycollectibles.com. Check them out at their store in Newtown, Connecticut. Tell them the Regular Joe sent you. Sorry, Troy, we're putting the ad later in the show again, but we get distracted sometimes.
We had cool things we had to get right too.
Exactly.
So, Michael, I just have to say, because I build models. I build small scale models. I've never built anything that was life size or full size. And I don't really tinker with electronics or lighting very often. But this past summer, I built the B9 robot for Todd that you see over his shoulder there 2 years ago, year ago. Dave had bought that same kit, but bought it with the full lighting and sound kit, but then got intimidated and asked me to build it for him. So I built two last summer. I built one for me, static, no lights or sounds, and I built his with the full light and sound kit. And I nearly pulled my hair out trying to do that, and that was just like a basic pre-wired kit. I can't even imagine. The things you're describing are just, I can't even imagine.
Well, here's the dirty little secret, Barry. The small models are harder than the big ones.
Yeah, you've told me that before, Brian.
The small ones the big ones are way easier.
Yeah, but it's all the other pieces that go along with that.
I know. I'm intimidated. I've been making stuff my whole life.
I do stuff like this. I can't do giant life-size stuff.
Yeah.
But it's amazing.
It's awesome. So what else? I know you've got projects, some going back 20 years. What else are you sort of currently working on that you could talk about?
Oh, well, I am working on. So I bought the HasLab Ghostbusters Proton Pack.
I did too. Yep.
So now I'm actually working. It's not really. I'm going to make the jumpsuit. Basically, that's all. Yep. I'm just working on a jumpsuit to go with it. So when the next movie comes out this fall, I'll be ready.
Oh, good.
And,
I had that, and I built all the soft goods with the elbow pads and all that stuff, and then at the time, this is years ago, I guess. My son was 10, I think. So it's like 11 years ago, because he was what's his name, Tully, with the colander on his head, and we went to go see Ghostbusters, but. The only thing you can do is build one from scratch, but this thing is awesome that it came out. So I was thrilled with that.
I'm going to give you a chance to do something here. We're going to see if this will work. Let me try this. Hold on. Okay, we got the neon. I'm going to let you speak and see if it'll pick it up.
What? Oh, it will. It moving while I'm. It's flashing while I'm talking.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Wow. So for those at home, we're watching the neon lights for what's going to be inside Robbie the Robot, which is amazing.
And it's moving as we're talking. That's awesome.
So it's voice activated. That's amazing.
That's funny.
There's a lot of wires.
That would actually work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the sound files are readily available.
Yeah. So, there will be sound files that we have that were ripped from the movie.
Yeah.
And then I will say this, we're going to try something. I don't think it's a secret. You guys are familiar with all the AI art and whatnot out there.
Yeah.
So now there's AI voice replication.
Oh.
And if you feed the AI enough audio, it can replicate a voice. So you could replicate Tom Cruise or Harrison Ford, whatever. We had about a minute and a half worth of Robbie the Robot. We fed into an AI, and we're still fine tuning it, but it is coming out pretty good. So
wow. So say different things.
We could eventually have Robbie say, "Welcome to whatever,"
Oh, that's great.
That's how we got to do that with Barry, so he can hate stuff the way we do.
Yeah, do that with me so you can make me say things I would never actually say.
I like that. That's awesome.
Because I'm the positive one on the show. These guys hate everything.
Willow sucks. No.
Yeah.
Willow doesn't suck.
Okay.
Well, the AI Barry will think so.
The Willow series sucked. I will readily say that, but the movie did not suck.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
That's
really
cool. Amazing. Yeah, I mean that AI voice stuff. I mean, I think that's how they're doing Darth Vader's voice now. I think that they got all the James Earl Jones.
He signed off on that to do that.
He signed off on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's all. I mean, I got to say, you're doing what I wish I could be doing. Something that's fun and a job, and 11-year-old you should be proud of yourself.
You know what? Hop on an airplane and I'll put you to work.
Okay.
I like sanding.
And that's the one thing. That's what I make my wife do when I build stuff. I don't like sanding.
and Dave won't say it because he won't say about it. But Dave's a pretty amazing craftsman in his own right. He does great work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always stuff.
Hey, you're welcome to come visit anytime.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah,
we appreciate that, and we will probably take you up on that.
You may regret that at some point.
Yeah, exactly. So where can everyone find you? You mentioned your Instagram, but you have a couple other places.
Well, no, just Instagram for the public stuff. My Facebook is more private for
but you have a website. If someone wants, if Paramount Pictures is listening to this and needs a robot for something, can they call you?
Yeah, they can find me on McMasterRobots.com.
There you go. I'm playing squash with Tom Cruise tomorrow, so I'll let you know.
Perfect.
But awesome to meet you. Amazing stuff. I look forward to seeing Robbie finish. That's amazing stuff. Really, really terrific.
Yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on. This has been it's been awesome hearing all these stories. We love hearing this stuff.
Yeah, terrific.
I think we have Brian to blame for this. Brian said, "There's this podcast that you have to be on." So
Brian is like our best cheerleader.
Yeah, exactly.
Which we appreciate. Brings people together.
He does. Yeah. He does. Absolutely. Well, I stalk people, and then we all bring each other together. So
yeah, I think I remember the first time Gordon was on the show, you had to admit that you had been stalking him on Instagram for a while.
The less we say of this on a recording,
because I saw Tested has been great. I saw Michael. I saw your Tested. That's where I saw Brian. That's where I saw Gordon. I'm like, and yet here we are. We know all these people, and you guys all know each other. It is a very small world.
Yeah,
so.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.